3,000 years before anyone would think to look, the sea had already closed over it. An entire city, its streets, its homes, its graves, sealed beneath the Mediterranean like a secret the earth itself had decided to keep. No ancient historian ever recorded its fall. No poet mourned its disappearance. For 30 centuries, fishermen hauled their nets through the waters above it. Swimmers passed over its rooftops on summer afternoons, and no one, not a single soul, had any idea that directly beneath them, resting on the sandy floor of a shallow Greek bay, lay one of the oldest urban landscapes ever built by human hands. The city is called Pavlopetri. It lies off the southern tip of the Peloponnese, in the region of Laconia, submerged in 3 to 4 meters of clear Aegean water near a quiet stretch of sand called Pounta Beach. Today, it is recognized as the oldest known submerged city in the world, and its story reaches back not merely 3,000 years, but 5,000, to the very dawn of European civilization. What was found there, and what its disappearance reveals about the fragility of even the most accomplished human societies, is a story that has quietly rewritten our understanding of the ancient Mediterranean world. To grasp what Pavlopetri once was, you have to travel back to a time before Greece as we know it existed, around 3,500 BCE. During the final centuries of the Neolithic period, a small community of settlers established itself along the coast of southern Laconia. The location they chose was not accidental. The site occupied a narrow channel between the Greek mainland and a landmass that is now the island of Elafonisos, but was then still a peninsula, connected to the Peloponnese by a low natural bridge of earth and rock. This geography created something invaluable in the ancient world: a sheltered harbor, a place where boats could be moored safely while storms raged in the open sea beyond. Fresh water was accessible nearby, the soil was workable, and the sea, stretching south toward Crete and east toward the islands of the Cyclades, offered passage to some of the most dynamic cultures the Bronze Age would ever produce. Over the following centuries, this modest settlement underwent a transformation that, given its remote location, is almost difficult to believe. By approximately 2800 BCE, the village had grown into a genuine city. Not a large one by modern standards, its footprint covered roughly 50,000 square meters, the equivalent of about 7 football pitches, but a city nonetheless. With all the hallmarks of organized urban life, its streets were laid out in deliberate parallel lines. Its buildings, constructed on carefully cut stone foundations, contained as many as 12 separate rooms arranged around central courtyards. At least 15 major structures have been identified, along with open spaces that appear to have served as communal gathering areas and a district along the waterfront that almost certainly functioned as a commercial harbor. This was not a random cluster of huts. It was a planned community, built with intention and maintained with discipline over generations. The people who lived in Pavlopetri during its long
Pavlopetri's
peak,
hidden
spanning
infrastructure,
roughly from 2800
a sophisticated
to
drainage
1100
system,
BCE, were participants in one of the great economic networks of the ancient world. The pottery recovered from the seabed tells the story with remarkable clarity. Large storage vessels known as pithoi, some standing over a meter tall, have been found still resting in the rooms where they were placed thousands of years ago. Many of these jars bear stylistic signatures unmistakably linked to Minoan and Crete, the brilliant island civilization that dominated the Aegean during the 2nd millennium BCE. Other fragments show influences from the Cycladic Islands and from settlements in the northeastern Aegean, painting a picture of a city that was not isolated, but deeply woven into a web of maritime exchange that stretched across hundreds of miles of open water. Olive oil, wine, grain, metals, and finished goods would have moved through Pavlopetri's harbor on a regular basis, carried by the wooden trading vessels that were the lifeblood of Bronze Age commerce. But Pavlopetri was not simply a waypoint for other people's goods. It produced wealth of its own. Hundreds of loom weights have been excavated from across the site, small, unassuming objects made of stone or clay that once held the vertical threads of upright looms taut, while weavers worked the horizontal threads through them. The sheer quantity of these weights points to textile production on a commercial scale. In the Bronze Age, cloth was far more than a domestic necessity. Fine textiles served as currency in diplomatic exchanges, as markers of social status, and as high-value trade commodities. A city that could produce textiles for export was a city of genuine economic power. The social complexity of Pavlopetri is further evidenced by its dead. Archaeologists from the University of Cambridge, who conducted the first systematic survey in 1968, discovered two distinct types of burial within the settlement: two larger chambered tombs and nearly 40 smaller cist graves, rectangular pits lined with stone slabs. The coexistence of these two burial forms strongly suggests a stratified society, one in which distinctions of wealth or status were maintained not only in life, but in death. These were people who understood hierarchy, who organized themselves into social classes, and who marked a passage from life with ritual and ceremony. Perhaps most impressively, the inhabitants of Pavlopetri engineered a sophisticated system of water management. A network of terracotta pipes and constructed channels ran beneath and between the buildings, directing the flow of rainwater and wastewater away from living spaces. This kind of infrastructure, which closely mirrors drainage systems found at the famous Minoan site of Akrotiri on Santorini, is not the work of a primitive society. It requires forethought, technical knowledge, and coordinated labor. It tells us that the people of Pavlopetri were not merely surviving on the edge of the sea. They were mastering it. As the centuries passed and Mycenaean civilization rose to prominence on the Greek mainland, after roughly 1750 BCE, Pavlopetri appears to have been absorbed into the Mycenaean sphere of influence. The Mycenaeans, the warrior traders whom Homer would later immortalize in the Iliad and the Odyssey, controlled a vast network of palace-centered economies, and the harbor city at the southern tip of Laconia would have been a strategic asset of considerable value. During this period, the city likely reached its greatest extent and prosperity, serving as a node in the larger system of Mycenaean maritime trade that connected Greece with Egypt, the Levant, and the coasts of Anatolia. And then the world that sustained it fell apart. Around 1200 BCE, a catastrophe engulfed the eastern Mediterranean on a scale that remains one of the most debated subjects in ancient history. Within the span of a few decades, nearly every major palace civilization in the region collapsed. The Mycenaean kingdoms on the Greek mainland were destroyed or abandoned. The Hittite Empire in Anatolia disintegrated. Trading cities along the coast of the Levant and Cyprus were burned or deserted. Egypt survived, but only barely, fighting off waves of invaders its scribes called the Sea Peoples. Historians refer to this period as the Late Bronze Age collapse, and its causes: drought, famine, invasion, internal revolt, the cascading failure of interconnected trade systems, or some combination of all of these, remain fiercely contested. What is beyond dispute is the outcome. The interconnected world that allowed cities like Pavlopetri to thrive was shattered. For a city whose very existence depended on maritime commerce, the severing of those trade networks would have been devastating. But geology had its own cruelties to impose. The southern Peloponnese sits directly above one of the most seismically volatile zones in Europe, where the African tectonic plate grinds beneath the Eurasian plate in a process of slow, violent subduction. Around 1000 BCE, a series of powerful earthquakes struck the region. The land beneath Pavlopetri began to subside, sinking centimeter by centimeter, generation by generation. At the same time, the Mediterranean itself had been rising gradually for centuries, gaining roughly 2 meters since the city's founding. By the time the earthquakes arrived, Pavlopetri stood barely a meter above sea level. The combination was lethal. Seawater began to infiltrate the streets. The harbor, once the source of the city's prosperity, became indistinguishable from the city itself. And then, after one or more additional seismic events between the 5th and 7th centuries CE, drove the seabed down another 3 meters. The Mediterranean closed over the last of Pavlopetri's walls. The city was gone. What followed was not merely abandonment, but erasure. For 1500 years, Pavlopetri lay beneath the waters of Vatica Bay in absolute anonymity. No classical Greek author mentions it. No Roman geographer notes its location. No Byzantine chronicle preserves even a distorted legend of a city swallowed by the sea. The silence is total, and it is, in its way, as remarkable as the city itself. a settlement that endured for more than 2,000 years, that traded with Minoans and Mycenaeans, that wove cloth and buried its dead and engineered the flow of water through its streets, was forgotten so thoroughly that it might as well have never existed. The first faint signal came in 1904, when a Greek geologist named Phocion Negris observed submerged ruins in the area, but his notes attracted little attention. The true discovery came in 1967, when Nicholas Fleming, a British marine geoarchaeologist from the University of Southampton, was conducting a survey of the Laconian coast. Wading through the shallows near Punta Beach, he noticed what no one had noticed in 3 millennia: the unmistakable outlines of walls, foundations, and streets visible through the clear water. Fleming had found the oldest submerged city in the world, lying in plain sight 20 meters from a public beach. A Cambridge team mapped the site the following year, using hand-drawn grids and measuring tapes, the best tools available for underwater archaeology at the time. Their work confirmed the extraordinary scope of the ruins, but could only scratch the surface of what lay below. It would take 40 more years for technology to catch up with the discovery. In 2009, a team from the University of Nottingham, led by archaeologists John Henderson and Chrysanthi Galou, launched a 5-year investigation in partnership with the Greek effort of underwater antiquities. They brought with them an entirely new generation of tools: remote-operated vehicles, sector scanning sonar capable of penetrating sediment layers, and a photogrammetric mapping system developed by the Australian Centre for Field Robotics at the University of Sydney. This system used arrays of stereo cameras to capture thousands of overlapping images of the seabed, which were then assembled by computer into 3-dimensional digital models of the ruins accurate to the millimeter. Pavlopetri became the first submerged city in history to be fully digitally mapped and reconstructed in 3 dimensions. The results expanded the known boundaries of the site dramatically. In a single season, more than 9,000 square meters of previously unrecorded structures were identified. The digital reconstruction revealed the complete city plan with a clarity that would have been unimaginable to the Cambridge team of 1968. Residential blocks, commercial districts, the harbor zone, the cemetery, and the network of streets that connected them all. For the first time, it was possible to see Pavlopetri not as a collection of scattered ruins, but as a coherent, functioning city, a place where people had lived, worked, traded, and died across more than 2,000 years of continuous occupation. Yet, for all that has been revealed, the most fundamental questions about Pavlopetri remain open. Was the city abandoned gradually, its population drifting away as trade collapsed and the sea encroached? Or was there a single catastrophic event, an earthquake, a tsunami, that forced a sudden evacuation? The archaeological record supports both possibilities without confirming either. There are no fire layers, no evidence of military destruction, which argues against the violent sacking. But the sheer volume of objects left behind, the pithoi still standing in their rooms, the loom weights scattered across workshop floors, suggests a departure that was not entirely planned. People who leave by choice take their valuables. People who flee leave
Check
everything
connections.
behind.
ROV is
And
prepped,
then
crane
there's
ready.
the deeper enigma
Good to
of
go.
memory itself. How does a city of this significance vanish not only from the physical landscape, but from the collective consciousness of an entire civilization? The classical Greeks, who were meticulous record keepers of their own mythology and history, preserved no trace of Pavlopetri. Neither did the Romans, the Byzantines, or the Ottomans. The chain of cultural transmission, the passing of stories from one generation to the next that normally preserves at least a fragment of historical memory, was broken so completely that it is as though the city never had a name at all. This silence suggests something profound about the nature of the Bronze Age collapse, that it was not merely an economic or political disruption, but a rupture in civilization itself. A wound so deep that entire communities could be swallowed not just by the sea but by time. Today, Pavlopetri faces threats that its builders could never have anticipated. Boat anchors scar its exposed walls. Pollution from commercial shipping erodes its stone. Tourists wade through the shallows and pocket fragments of pottery that have rested undisturbed for millennia. The World Monuments Fund placed the site on its endangered list in 2016, and Greek authorities have begun installing protective buoys and offering guided underwater tours led by professional archaeologists, attempting to balance public access with preservation. But the fundamental vulnerability remains. The city survived 3,000 years beneath the sea. Whether it can survive 3 decades of the modern world is an open question. What Pavlopetri finally compels us to confront is not merely the story of one city, but the vastness of what we do not know. Sea levels have risen more than 100 meters since the last ice age. Every coastline on Earth has shifted. The continental shelves of every landmass are littered with a degree of human habitation stretching back thousands of years. The overwhelming majority of it unexamined and unrecorded. When Frank Gaudio discovered the legendary Egyptian port of Thonis Heraklion beneath the waters of Abu Qir Bay in the year 2000, a city mentioned by Herodotus, connected to the myth of Helen of Troy, once the greatest harbor in all of Egypt. It had lain undiscovered for over 1,000 years, just 7 kilometers from a modern shoreline, and Gaudio himself estimates that only 5% of that single site has been explored. Pavlopetri was found by one man wading in shallow water off a beach in 1967. It had been there, in plain sight, for 3,000 years. Its people traded with the Minoans. They wove textiles for markets across the Aegean. They engineered drainage systems and built homes with stone foundations, and buried their dead in lined graves. They were part of the fabric of one of the most sophisticated periods of human civilization, and when the ground shifted and the water rose, they were erased so completely that not even a whisper of their existence survived. The ocean does not forget. It simply holds what it has taken and waits, somewhere beneath its surface, off the coasts of India, along the drowned river valleys of the Persian Gulf, beneath the shallow waters of the Black Sea. Other cities are waiting in the same patient silence. Other streets, other stories, other names that no living person has spoken in 1,000 years. The technology to find them is advancing faster than at any point in history. Sonar grows sharper, submersibles dive deeper, artificial intelligence processes seabed imagery at scales that were unthinkable a decade ago. The question that Pavlopetri poses to us is not whether more lost cities exist beneath the world's oceans. The question is how many, and whether we will find them before the sea, in its slow and indifferent way, erases the last of what they were.